Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Aftermath expansion for Battlefield 3. And check out this parachute drop here on Marquez Monolith. It's a rush game, we're assaulting, and I managed to land on the top floor here inside this building, immediately kill these three guys, and then proceed to clear out all the top floors of this building, making it easier for my team to assault the next MCOM. Now, Aftermath is the first expansion to kind of follow a bit of the story of the single player aspect of Battlefield 3, where there was a big earthquake in the single player aspect, and these maps are all earthquake-stricken areas near the Tehran location. Now, Battlefield 3 has already made huge improvements compared to previous Battlefield titles when it comes to urban map design. However, Aftermath has taken that to a whole new level. There are massive skyscrapers, multiple buildings of multiple stories everywhere. I mean, just check out this cityscape here. Anything you can see, you can pretty much go into and fight in and fight around. The cities are massive, and playing on large 64-player servers does not feel too clustered. In fact, it feels like just the right amount of action and mayhem. Now, the expansion brings a new game mode called Scavenger, which kind of allows you to run around the map and picking up weapons instead of starting with preset weapons. This will sort of force you into using a random set of weapons and having less control over your loadouts. It's a fun little game type, but I think the expansion really excels in the Rush and Conquest game modes. The four new maps are Epicenter, Marquez Monolith, Azadi Palace, and Tala Market. This clip right here is a rush game, 64 players on Epicenter, and we're trying to get to this MCOM in the middle of a sort of earthquake-torn highway. And the highway is really dividing either side of the map. We're attacking on one side, they're defending on the other side, and we're both trying to get to the center where the MCOM is. And it's absolutely crazy with tons of chaos, tons of action, and it is just an absolute blast to play on these maps. The big skyscrapers kind of remind me a bit of Battlefield 2142 and maps like the old Fall of Berlin, which really just had lots of big skyscrapers around you and tons of really cool looking urban combat. They absolutely achieved this huge urban city feeling in these new maps, and it's really just a new atmosphere that I have not experienced in Battlefield 3. As usual, the attention to detail in the map design is just absolutely stunning. There is no multiplayer game out there that has better looking visuals than Battlefield 3, and especially the Battlefield 3 expansions. But in addition to that, the level designers have really gone back to the basics a bit and created maps that have really good lanes in them, but not too few lanes to create intense choke points. These maps flow really well, both on 64 players and 32 player map sizes. In addition to the preset lanes, there's also some cool hidden little alleyways that you can take that are usually covered up by rubble or some blue doors that have explosives nearby. If you shoot the explosive canisters, they will open up pathways going through some of the skyscrapers at the base, and you can sort of find new paths going through buildings if some of the outside paths are already being covered by the enemy. Now, here's some scout helicopter gameplay. The one map, Marquez Market, allows for scout helicopters in the conquest mode of that map, actually in the rush mode as well. It's the only map of the four that allows for flying vehicles, and I think that they have balanced these flying vehicles perfectly. Previously, I think that aerial vehicles have had a little bit too much dominance in the Battlefield maps, and this time around there's enough large structures and good anti-air defenses to really not let the Little Birds rule the maps. Most of the time I went up in the Little Bird, I was either shot down by tanks or machine guns on tanks, or there's just plenty of other helicopters up in the air to really mess with my flying. So at no point during flying did I feel like I was really dominating the map. I had to work for my kills and definitely work to stay alive. Now, they have made a few tanks available here in the Conquest game modes and some of the Rush game modes, along with some lightly armored Humvees and vans and Vodniks and stuff like that. The armor definitely doesn't dominate. There's so many points in this map for infantry to hide with RPGs and C4 and whatnot that you really have to be on your toes as a tank driver. It's a lot of fun driving the tanks throughout these big urban environments, but they are not going to dominate. I think they have really nailed it with the mixture of air vehicles and armored vehicles in these maps, allowing anybody who likes to play infantry to really feel like you have enough freedom to get around without having to play engineer exclusively, and people who like to play armor are still going to be able to enjoy it because there's going to be so many infantry targets for you to try and engage that you're going to have your hands full. Now, some previous expansions had optimization issues, like back to Karkand. A lot of people had really low frame rates on maps like Gulf of Oman. There doesn't seem to be much of an issue with that on these new maps. They look extremely detailed, they look very large, but at the same time the frame rates seem to be very stable. I think this is in part due to a reduced destruction capacity in the maps. It's not that the maps don't offer a lot of destruction, it's just it's much more limited than perhaps you might expect, especially compared to Gulf of Oman, where it seemed like every single building could pretty much be destroyed except for the large ones. Here they've really just tactically decided which areas can be destroyed and which areas can't be destroyed, and I think that probably really helps the frame rates and just how much CPU power you need to deal with all the destruction. There's still plenty of small things to blow up, like overhangs and doors and all that kind of stuff. There's definitely less map sculpting, especially when you compare it to older Battlefield games like Bad Company 2, where you could really just demolish an entire city. You're not going to be able to do that in this expansion, but they've at least given us ways to sort of blaze our own trails through key buildings and stuff like that. It's a little bit more scripted with the destruction when compared to older Battlefield titles, but at the same time it allows for good map design and good balance. Now, with maps that look this good and are balanced this well and run this well, I'm willing to forgive DICE for sort of limiting some of the destruction. I understand that, you know, things are CPU intensive and you have to sort of make trade-offs with the amount of destruction and how fast the game can run and how well maps can be balanced. If you let every building get destroyed, well, then it's kind of hard to create lanes and paths for the combat to flow throughout the map. So if you sort of tactically choose structures that can be destroyed, you can much more control the flow of action throughout a map and ultimately balance a better combat area. Now, many previous expansions have relied on a few gimmicky things to try and pique people's interests. There's been the AC-130, for example, which unfortunately became a bit game-breaking. It sure looked awesome in trailers, but once it actually got implemented, the balancing issues became huge, and it ultimately made the expansion far less viable, far less playable. These maps, these 4 new maps in Aftermath, are all extremely well balanced, and I think they really represent some of the best gameplay that Battlefield 3 has ever had. So this expansion here, although it doesn't bring anything quite as flashy to the table as the AC-130, ultimately it brings great gameplay, great map design, and I think it's going to have a longevity that far exceeds the Armored Kill expansion. Now, sadly, if you're a jet pilot, there really isn't a lot for you in this expansion, but at the same time, I've never been a huge fan of jet gameplay because whenever I find myself doing really well in a jet, I also realize that the other team must really be suffering because of their inability to shoot me down. Jets have always been such a hard thing to balance, and I think just leaving them out of this expansion overall has really helped its ability to just be really well balanced and really fun. Now, sadly, we haven't gotten a whole bunch of new guns to use that were sort of hinted at in some earlier advertising, but we do have the X-Bow, which is an interesting crossbow. It does allow for some unique class balancing with classes like the support class or the recon class. I think the expansion would have been a little bit more marketable had we been given, say, an array of new assault rifles and machine guns and that sort of thing, but the map design is so good that it really does make up for the lack of weapons. So in conclusion, I think that the Aftermath expansion has literally some of the best multiplayer maps that I've played in any first-person shooter. It's worth getting this expansion just to play these maps on Conquest and Rush. It's an absolute blast, and it's got a few extra little tidbits here and there to keep you interested in the long run. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.